In the previous video, I showed you how to create a MongoDB document, and we also went through the basic structure of a document. Now, when you're working with databases, often you're going to work on existing documents or existing databases. So it's very important to know how to import data that you already have. So that's what we're going to do today. We'll see how to import data into MongoDB databases and collections. We are also going to create a couple of our own documents, add that to that collection, and finally, we also want to export those files as a JSON format. In that case, if you want to share that file with somebody else, then they can import that into their own database. So importing and exporting files. Now, for this video, I'm going to use some of the sample JSON files.
To download the files, please check the link in the video description.
After you have downloaded and extracted the files from that zip, you can see some of these files. Now, I'm going to use the recipes.json file for today's example. Feel free to use the other files for your task. So let's go ahead and open our Mongo shell. So I'm going to go to the Launchpad, search for terminal. And just like my previous video, I'll show you how to do this in both Windows and Mac. I'm starting with Mac, and after this, I'm going to show you how to do this in Windows. The commands are very similar in both operating systems, so should not be a problem. To go into Mongo shell, first type mongo sh. We are inside Mongo shell now. So let's check show dbs. So these are the databases. And the first database is what we created in our previous video. So let's go inside that database. So use first database. And to see the collections that we have, we write show collections. We have two collections, clothing store and example. If I go inside clothing store, we can find the documents that we already have. So we have one document, that one we created in the last video. So db, then the collection name, which is clothing store, dot find, keep the parenthesis empty, and then semicolon. We'll go talk about how to write these find queries in future videos. Now, this is the only document that we have inside that collection, clothing store. White shirt, that's the document we created. Now, if I want to import more documents inside, say, a new collection, but inside our first database, how do we do that? The first step is we have to go out of the Mongo shell, because Mongo shell is completely different from Mongo import or Mongo export. These are separate programs. So you have to exit out of this shell. And the Mongo import and export, those programs are part of the MongoDB database tools, which you should already have on your computer if you have followed my videos on how to install MongoDB. So I showed you how to do that. Now, when you want to import some files, of course, you want to know where those files are located. For me, the files are located on my desktop. So let's go to that folder. So cd, change directory. I'm going to desktop and MongoDB resources. So this is where I have the files. We can verify that using ls-l. And yes, these are the files that I want to import in my MongoDB. Now the syntax, the main command. So Mongo import. And again, Mongo import allows you to import local files. You can also use username and password. You can also import files from online sources. So there are a lot of options. But for now, to keep things simple, we are going to import some local files. So like this. So Mongo import, then the collection name. And say I want to import the recipes, and I name it the recipes collection. Then you also specify the database, so DB, and our database name is firstDatabase. If you want, you can specify new database and collection here, and those will be created for you. Now next, the type of file. So the files are JSON, so you have to specify JSON. Now one important parameter here is when you're importing JSON files, it's recommended to specify these, otherwise you're gonna get some errors. JSonArray and then the actual file name, so which is recipes.json for me. Yeah, so this is the entire command: Mongo import, collection, database, the file type, then an extra attribute, JSON array, and then recipes.json, enter. And you see 7 documents imported successfully. That's awesome. So we have imported them successfully. So let's see whether we can see them inside Mongo. So we're going to go inside Mongo shell, Mongo sh. And then show collections. Yeah, so we have that recipes as a new collection. And if I want to see whether we have those 7 documents, so db, then recipes dot find. Now this output is going to be big, but yeah. So you can see we have all those documents, the recipes here. Now if I want to see only the titles of those documents, just to keep things a little bit simpler for us, see db and then the collection name dot find, and this time instead of keeping it empty, we're gonna structure this a little bit differently. We'll talk about how to do this in future videos, but for now just try this. I want to see only the titles of those documents, so title equals 1 and then semicolon. And you can see these are the 7 documents. So 7 recipes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now if you want to create new documents, of course you can create new documents and add them here. And this is something that we have discussed in the previous video. So doc2 will create a sample document. I think this should be enough just to demonstrate how it works. So we close off. And yeah, so we got a new document and this is ready to be inserted to our existing collection. So we do that by db, then the collection name, which is recipes, and insert 1. Again, this is something that we have done in the previous video. I'm just showing you how we can add to this existing collection before exporting the files. So insert 1 and then doc2, which is my variable name that I used here. You can use anything that you want. When you do that, we get acknowledged true. Now we are ready to check whether we added a new document. So if I were to run the previous command, this one, I should be able to see this new recipe listed. So let's try this. You can use the up arrow to see this. So we want to see the titles, enter. And indeed, we have the new recipes listed here. So we are done. We have imported the documents. We have added some documents to that. Now we want to export these files. How do we do that? Again, we have to exit out of this shell. So exit. And we have to use Mongo export. So write Mongo export. Then when you're using Mongo export, we have to specify the collection. Our collection name is recipes. Then the database. And finally, the output file name. So my output file would be, say, output file dot JSON. And when I do that, we get exported 8 records because I imported 7, then added 1. And now we have successfully exported 8 records to this output file. We can verify this by ls-l. And you can see we got this output file.json. You can also see that by going to the directory, we have this output file.json exported, and we are done. So we learned how to import and export files to MongoDB. Now I'm gonna very quickly do the same thing on Windows just to keep things consistent. So let's jump to Windows now. I am on my Windows machine now, and I have kept the files, the resources on my desktop. So MongoDB JSON files are right here. So let's go to our command prompt now. So I'm gonna go to my start menu and type cmd and open the command prompt. Now I highly recommend, just like by Mac, let's go to the location where we have kept the files. So my files are on desktop, so cd and then desktop, and after that MongoDB resources. That's the directory where I have the files. Now this is where I have the files. You can verify by typing in dir, and yeah, so this is where my files are. So these are the JSON files. Now we are ready to start importing the files to our MongoDB database. To do that, so just like our Mac command, so Mongo import, but this time you have to add .exe because this is Windows executable. So mongoimport.exe. Rest of the command is exactly the same. So you can just write collection and then database, and finally the file name. And when we do that, we get these 7 documents imported successfully. So our command was successful. We could go inside the Mongo shell and verify quickly. If you type in mongosh, you'd be able to go into Mongo shell. And you can see we have these recipes right here. So we are going to exit out of that. And finally, to export, just like before, we have to add .exe. So Mongo export.exe, and then the rest of the command is exactly the same. So -- collection, the output file name, and the records have been exported, and you can see the new file, the output file right here. So outfile.json, and that's all.
Please like the video if you found it useful and subscribe for more videos on MongoDB.